Welcome back. As geopolitical tensions rise and global economies search for new growth engines, Southeast Asia finds itself in a pivotal position. On the sidelines of the recent 46th ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, we managed to speak with Chris Humphrey, the Executive Director of the EU-ASEAN Business Council, to get his views on what the region must do to attract high-quality European investment, how to navigate great power rivals, as well as why the next few years could be ASEAN's golden moment. First, we asked Chris this question: why is it important now for Southeast Asia and the European Union to step up trade and investment?
I think we're living in a very different economic climate today than we were before January the 6th of this year. Donald Trump has come in and he's clearly determined to disrupt the entire global economy. And you can have different views about his motives, the economic case behind his tariffs, and I personally think his tariffs are completely nonsensical. And the approach is just strange and probably going to do more damage to the US. One of the big silver linings of this is he's waking the whole of the world up and realizing they need to approach what they've been doing previously in a different way. That's particularly true for Europe. I think Europe now realizes it's been in an abusive relationship with the US. It's going to get worse, it's not going to get better. Europe needs to find more friends out there in the world who have the same mindset. That automatically points you towards Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Both blocs believe in a global rules-based trading order. They both want to do things about greening their economies as well. And they are a natural fit when it comes to trade with each other. They complement the trade with each other. They're not competing with each other, it's complementary trade. Certainly, when I was in Brussels recently, the mindset in Brussels now is we need to do more international outreach, we need to work more with our partners, we need to trade and invest more with our partners.
This is after
the
tariffs?
Yeah, after the tariffs. So the mindset in Europe has definitely changed. And it's now we need to do more outreach, we need to work more with our international partners. And ASEAN has suddenly leapt up the agenda in Brussels as a result of that. I think you're going to see a lot more interaction, a lot more high-level visits, a lot more European businesses looking to Southeast Asia. The truth about ASEAN is quite simple. The ASEAN growth story has been phenomenal, and the fundamentals that underline that growth story have not changed as a result of Donald Trump. If anything, they're going to get stronger. So we have rapid GDP growth, we have rapid urbanization, we have growing middle classes, we have a relatively young tech-savvy population in Southeast Asia, we have good manufacturing bases, we have critical raw materials. All the things are there to help the region continue to grow. And I think European businesses certainly see this as a region of growth going forward. So you'll see more trade with Europe and more investment coming from Europe.
But if you want to
Next, we asked Chris this: what is the potential for increased cooperation between the EU and Southeast Asia?
I think you see potential in almost every area. We certainly see potential in areas like energy transition, support for the ASEAN power grid. We see areas like semiconductors, without a doubt. Some very large European firms are here in Malaysia, also in Singapore and elsewhere in the region, people like Infineon and ST Microelectronics, etc. Certainly there's space in general manufacturing, and there's space in automotive as well, EV development, and pharmaceutical development as well. The region holds much promise, and not just to manufacture here to export to the rest of the world, but to manufacture here and sell to domestic markets within Southeast Asia at the same time. That's why it is so attractive.
We also asked Chris this on how will EU's regulatory mindset shift to support more open trade with Southeast Asia, especially in important sectors like pharmaceuticals.
There's another change in mindset. Along with the we need more friends in the world change in mindset in Brussels, the other mindset change is we need to make sure that Europe is more competitive, and we need to make sure that we are deregulating and we are simplifying some of our regulations. But certainly parts of the European Green Deal, the Commission has now realised we went too far. The reporting requirements were too onerous, they're too bureaucratic, they're too expensive, or just too difficult, actually, in some cases. So there's a whole simplification process going on now in Brussels. That makes life easier for anybody doing business within the EU or wanting to do business with the EU, and that includes companies here in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia. So that is going to change. I think the other thing to say is we now have 4 ongoing FTA negotiations between EU and Southeast Asia. We have Indonesia, which is close to finalisation, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. All 3 of those countries and the European Commission want to accelerate the work on those trade deals. Another silver lining to Donald Trump is it's making them realise we need to do these things quicker, and we need to be a bit more pragmatic in how we're approaching these deals. And if those trade deals get over the line, of course, access to the European market for Malaysian firms, Thai firms, Filipino firms, Indonesian firms suddenly becomes much easier.
Well, we didn't stop there. We further asked Chris on EU Southeast Asia trade and investment and how that can help navigate challenges like US tariffs on semiconductors.
I think the first thing to say about the semiconductor industry is it's far too concentrated in Taiwan and South Korea. Too concentrated for the good of the world, in that matter of fact. So we need to find more diversification of supplies for semiconductors. So the moves by the Malaysian government to try and attract more of the industry here must be surely welcomed. By coming here as well, companies will have other markets they can look to sell their chips to, whether that's China, whether it's to Europe, Africa or Latin America or anywhere else. So it makes perfect sense. Now, you're always going to have this problem, I'm afraid. Some of these chips are very, very high-end technology. The countries who have been patenting the technology want to make sure it doesn't get into what they feel are the wrong hands. I think that's down to international governments to try and make sure that what's being produced here is being sold to the people that it can be sold to. There's always going to be ways around sanctions. Companies, people, as human beings, we're very good at trying to find ways around what we see as obstacles or problems. But I'm pretty sure the Malaysian government will work this problem out. Certainly the semiconductor firms from Europe want to make sure that their chips are being sold to legitimate customers who have the right to buy them.
Well, Europe has FTAs with Singapore and Vietnam. The question now is, how have those agreements impacted trade? And what's the current status of EU negotiations with other ASEAN countries like Thailand, of course, Malaysia and the Philippines? Why is it important to now accelerate these efforts, particularly for Malaysia?
The other countries within ASEAN.
Well, we have existing FTAs now with Singapore and Vietnam.
Yeah, that's the one.
They've grown the trade tremendously between Europe and both those countries, particularly Vietnam. Vietnam's done extremely well out of its FTA. And I think because of the success of the Vietnam one, Thailand realised they need to come back to the table. The same is true for the Philippines and for Malaysia.
Oh, is it?
Negotiations are underway now.
Okay.
So they were on hold for different reasons. They were both recommenced last year. And I understand from the negotiating teams in Brussels and at this end in Southeast Asia, progress is going extremely well. Both sides believe it can go even faster, and there is huge pressure from the political masters on both sides to make sure those negotiations move quick. And there are ambitions to try and get them all done, Thailand, Malaysia and the Philippines, by the end of next year if we can. I think both sides see a need for it, especially in the current geopolitical, geoeconomic climate we're living in. Business certainly wants it. European businesses have been complaining for years about the lack of free trade agreements with Southeast Asia compared to our rivals in Korea or Japan or Australia or India or China. It puts European businesses at a distinct disadvantage. And to be honest, Europe needs suppliers from Southeast Asia, whether it's commodities like palm oil or nickel, or whether it's developed products, or whether it's agricultural goods. Europe needs those suppliers as well.
Well, then this brought about the question of what are some of the trade challenges that ASEAN needs to overcome to fully benefit from these FTAs with the EU, particularly when it comes to non-tariff barriers.
And I would agree with you, non-tariff barriers are the problem. But they're not unique to Southeast Asia. Every country, including the EU, do have non-tariff barriers. But they're quite prominent here, whether it is quotas on imports to a place like Thailand, whether it's local content requirements in Indonesia or non-automatic import licenses in Indonesia, whether it is bumi putra here in Malaysia, whether it is quotas on the imports of automotives to Malaysia. every country in the region has non-tariff barriers. We need to start tackling those. Now, ASEAN committed under the AEC process, launched here last time Malaysia was in the chair of ASEAN, committed to try and tackle those NTBs. As businesses, we're not seeing much happening. But I think now another silver lining of Donald Trump and his tariffs is I think the countries here realise, first, we need to trade more with each other, because if we trade more with each other in Southeast Asia, it provides us with some cushion against external economic effects. Secondly, if we trade more with each other, we open up more possibilities and we can protect ourselves more. But to do that, we need to start tackling some of those NTBs that we have.
Well, finally, we asked Chris how ASEAN exporters can appeal better to the European consumer market, generally known for high standards and strong sustainability preferences.
Propensity to produce is higher, propensity to consume is higher as well, and that creates opportunities for third parties, like countries here in Southeast Asia. And as I said earlier, I think the two are very complementary in terms of what they're producing and what they need from each other as well. But European consumers are very discerning, and particularly these days they're looking to make sure the products that they are buying, the goods they are buying, are produced sustainably, are produced in a green way. And I think that's an area where Southeast Asia has been making strides forward, but probably needs to demonstrate more to the European consumer about the good stuff that has been happening here. So if I was to look at Malaysia, the great work that's been done on sustainability in palm oil here, you need to be able to explain that more and market it better to the European consumer.